this particular segment, we have the fortune to meet someone whose origins goes back to Louisiana and the French aspect of the United States, and therefore showing us that you don't have to absolutely be Polish or Slavic or whatever to engage in this particular ritual art and in the joy of Easter. So we welcome here Samantha Michel, one of our best, if you don't mind me say student in this particular case. And we welcome your enthusiasm, and you take it from here.
You can always call me student father. I am always learning. So for today's egg, we are going to be doing a myrtle and sunburst design. This is a very classic design, I'm given to understand, and it's a lot of fun. So the way you always want to start an egg, it will have been rinsed with vinegar just to kind of clean off any imperfections. And then we'll start by making some divisions. So I always start my divisions on the bottom of an egg, but it's really up to you.
The bottom basically means the wider section of the egg.
And we're going to make some north-south divisions here. It's important when doing this. I like to keep my pinky finger kind of resting on the egg. It helps make the lines straighter. Everyone's got their own sort of techniques, but I find that one works pretty well. And as I am a student, I have also become a teacher. I have shared this beautiful art form with many of my friends and also my family. My family learned it right alongside me, but I sort of ran with it. And I have since taught my younger nephews and niece.
Well, your family actually has a workshop area set up during Lent, isn't it?
Yes, sir, and it is up and running. I've made 13 eggs this week. Specifically, I've been asked to donate some for a fundraiser going on next week at St Aloysius School. So I'm donating some eggs for sale. And that'll be Friday night, yeah. So I'm trying to get my collection of eggs back up and running. So basically, we divided it into 4 sections here, north-south. And then we're going to do the same thing along what we call the east-west corridor here, cutting it in half the other direction. This one's always a little harder because eggs tend to be wider on one side than the other. But a very important thing to remember, and I always remind all of my friends when I teach them, no egg is going to be perfect because these are made by people, not by machines. So if you have a little glitch, don't worry.
And as you can see here, dividing up the egg is going to give you the possibility to repeat a design in each corner of the egg. So, so many times people will go, how do you paint that? Well, first of all, you see it's written with the wax. But what you basically do all the way through is repeat the same design over and over again, and it forms a whole.
So, to speed things along a little here. Now we have made some further divisions inside each one of our quadrants. I'm going to show those in a little more detail here. We're starting from our intersections here, making a triangle. And then pulling that triangle to the top. And again, they're not always going to be perfectly even. And you have to be careful when you're working with wax because whatever's on there is gonna stay. So we just want to take your time.
Yeah, that's a good point. You never can erase any wax that you've applied hot molten wax onto the egg. Even if you try to scratch it and you don't see it any longer, there's still wax that soaks into the pores of the shell.
So now that we have completed, this is all of our divisions for this egg. Now you see it looks fairly complicated at this point, but you'll notice the repeating pattern. And then we're going to add the myrtle leaves.
Actually, a number of triangles that developed from just cutting down each section.
And we're drawing myrtle leaves. It's a 3-leaf design on each one of these intersecting triangles.
Myrtle is a ritual herbal plant. It's a fragrant myrtle. and it is used to decorate the table as a garnish, kind of a table decoration. It's used to ornament and garnish an Easter basket. It's also used at wedding ceremonies and making wreaths for young girls who are looking to get married. So it has a lot of different symbolisms to it. And because it's the fragrant myrtle, it's the one that you really have to have the greenest thumb in the town to be able to grow. So people who have myrtle in their homes are considered somewhat specially blessed with almost certain powers that can take care of this plant, because it's quite a finicky plant.
I think this is the closest I'm ever going to have to myrtles, because I don't do well with plants.
You do fine with these Pisanki.
Just the drawing of them, that I can do. So you want to try to keep the leaves as even as possible, so they're not looking lopsided. And once again, we're drawing on each one of these. Repeating patterns, lots of repeating patterns in these classic designs.
And that's what makes really the art of writing an egg, pisanka, very simple, because you're repeating the same thing over and over again. You're not drawing an entire pattern, but you're drawing segments of it in a repetitious form. And so as repeating it, you're doing the same strokes over and over again. And it actually simplifies the kind of perspective of how can you do such a complex thing.
Yes, that is very important to share when teaching as well, that, you know, if you break it down into the component parts, it becomes much easier to replicate. Okay, so here we have the finished sort of original design. The myrtle leaves,
Very
the
well
intersections.
You see how nice and wide the leaves are, equally spaced, the branches, the triangles. You're gonna see why that's very important in a second.
Okay, so then we will take the egg, now completed, and everything we've just colored is going to stay white. So now we're going to choose our first color. You always work light to dark. So our first color is pink. So we're going to put our egg into the pink dye. You always want to be very careful when you do this to rest the egg on the spoon. Very gently place it into the dye bath. And generally, the longer you leave an egg in the dye, the darker it will get. But every egg is a little different, so even if you do the exact same color pattern on 10 different eggs, they might all have a slightly different shade. Now that our egg has been sitting in the dye, we will remove it and very gently kind of cradle it with a paper towel. And you always want to pat dry, not rub, because if you rub, the color will come off.
The color gradually is going to fix and dry on the egg. So that's why it's very important not to try to rub it dry, but just pat it, as Samantha's doing here.
Always be gentle. And these are, of course, whole raw eggs. So.
Yeah, these are chicken eggs, whole raw eggs, purchased from any store. And as you already know, you just wipe it with a little bit of vinegar at the beginning to remove any oils or impurities, and your hands too as well.
People ask, how does the wax get into the kitska here? And that would be by heating it. On the end here is a metal barrel, and you heat the metal barrel in the candle till it starts to smoke, you'll know, and then take it down to your wax, and it will melt the wax, and you can very easily scoop the melted wax right into that barrel. And then it will come from the bottom, and you can write with it. So now we have our egg with the original design completed. We're going to fill in some of these myrtle leaves just by once again writing on the egg.
Now somebody might be asking, how come the wax is black? Well, from the candle flame, soot is formed and actually burns the wax. And so both the combination of the burning process and the soot darkens the wax black, but does not hurt its properties. As a matter of fact, it makes it much easier to write with because it's much more visible. And so that's actually a positive byproduct of this process when you use a candle and the beeswax. You want the wax to be black because it's easier to see, and all that blackness and soot comes out in the final phase when you remove it.
That is always an exciting part of the egg, is the final melting process, which we'll see a little bit later. So when you're coloring in a large space such as these myrtle leaves, you want to make sure to try to keep your strokes very smooth and even so you get full coverage, because you don't want to miss any spots. If you miss spots, the color will not be complete underneath. So basically we're just coloring in every other set of myrtle leaves. Once again, making a nice pattern. And generally when I'm working on an egg, I just kind of get in the zone. I don't really think about other things. And I've had workshops with several of my friends, doing one next week per their request. And I love teaching other people. I think anyone can learn. They say, oh, that's so complicated, and they can be, but I think anyone is capable of learning. It just takes a little time and a little patience.
Just to resound what you say, zoning out or zoning in to this, for me it's a meditation. I call it occupational therapy. And I really need this prior to the busyness of Holy Week, because every single symbol that goes on the egg, every single pattern, even the colors, speak. And they speak of a certain amount of meaning here. Here you're seeing a white egg, which is the color of light and resurrection and happiness. Then you have the various other colors, in this case a pink color, which is a color very close to love, especially love when it's shared between two people. Here, Samantha is beginning. What's design is this going to be?
This is the sunburst design. So we're drawing what's going to be pink lines in between each one of our intersections here. And it's really going to just make each one of these intersections pop with some color.
There's almost an explosion of color here. Just like we speak so much about sunrise service or Easter sunrise or the brightness of the sun returning in the spring. You get to experience that by writing an egg like this. You almost participate in the warmth that is developed because you're working with light, you're working with a flame, you're working with a candle, you're working with molten wax, and the smells of the beeswax and the vinegar and the entire process are all become, for a traditional artist, I think, a part of the celebration of preparation of Lent and then Easter.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the smell, because that's one of my... The smell tends to evoke memories, and always when I start the Pisanki process, that smell of wax and slightly cooked eggs, because they get a little warm when you melt them, and the beeswax and the candle soot all have a very particular and very definitive smell, and it just brings me straight there, and once I get started, I don't want to stop.
A number of our artists who visit here at this particular project have said that. They said they feel like they need to start earlier and earlier because they have to stop too quickly, because Easter comes too quickly once you start writing the Easter eggs, the Pisanki.
And again, I said I've used these. I like to give them as gifts. It's one of my favorite things is to share these with my friends and family. I've given them as birthday gifts. A couple years ago, my now sister-in-law came into the church, and as a confirmation gift, I gave her a few of these. And I just, people always seem to really enjoy them, and I enjoy sharing the art with them in one way or another.
Particularly after they're blessed, they become sacramental, so they reveal to us some religious faith meaning, in addition to and building upon the natural meaning of rebirth and renewal. The symbols of rebirth and renewal which we see here are also become symbols of transformed creation. No chicken can lay an egg like this one. okay? We need the human creative spirit, which works along with the Creator, to be able to draw the energy of creation together with human imagination and be able to experience, because I don't know what you feel, but I feel this is more like an experience of doing something other than just making something. I don't know how you feel, Samantha.
Absolutely, that's a really good way of describing it, because obviously it is making something, but to me it doesn't feel like work. It's not something I feel like I have to do other than I really want to. But, you know, it is very transformative, and it's a lot of fun for me to, you know, start with a blank egg and say, what am I going to make today? And I've got lots of pictures of traditional designs from Father's collection and some other ones I've acquired over the years. And I like to copy a lot of the traditions. Sometimes I combine various eggs together, but I like to use different color patterns. One of my favorite things about these is how bright the colors are, how vibrant, because I think that's very indicative of life. A lot of times life is bright, sometimes too bright, but and being able to combine colors in unusual ways is one of my favorite things.
You were speaking about the brightness. What came to my mind immediately, now you don't see this brightness. It's all black lines on this kind of, well, maybe because it's nice because it's reddish pink color. But out of all the dark wax, the soot and everything, out from under that comes the brightness that you speak. It rises from the earth.
So this is our second step. First color is now completed. Every other, this is important too when you're making a repeating pattern, to always, before you put it into the next color, double check. Because I've had some before where I missed a section. So we want to have intersections, should each have, basically it's a V, which is going to turn into our sunburst. And then every other myrtle is colored in. So it looks like we got them all.
Exquisite job. Exquisite.
And it's always important as well to hold the egg carefully, cradle the egg, because you don't want to be flinging it around. You don't want it to drop. It's very unfortunate. It happens
Everybody
sometimes.
has that practice at least once.
So we try to cradle it. So our next color will be orange. Going to put it into the orange dye. And okay. Into our orange, once again, kind of cradle the egg very softly into the dye. Don't want to break it. And just let it sit there for a few minutes while the color takes. So while that's dyeing, it's going to take a few minutes for the color to take. This basket contains some of my personal collection of eggs. Again, most of these are sort of traditional designs that I have adapted.
But some of your favorites.
Over the years. Absolutely.
I can see from what you have here.
They are some of my favorites. I really enjoy the repeating patterns. I'm a big fan of those. And I do like the flowers that are rounded, kind of like how the myrtle leaves are. This is a new one. But again, these rounded petal flowers I just think are beautiful. Very much feel like spring and Easter and, you know, so many things that it represents. But then again, we also have a snowflake egg. Winter is one of my favorite seasons. And this egg is probably my favorite design. I have made this particular design many times over the years, but I keep giving them away. So,
and they're actually getting better and better.
This is the only one currently in my collection, but I really like this one because of the richness of the colors. There's so many layers of colors. You go from the yellow to the orange, the green, the red, and this darker color is purple.
As you hold that there, that particular egg is a Kraków design, in other words, from one of the capitals of Poland, and it was designed by a now deceased egg writer from Niagara Falls, New York. She designed it out on an insurance brochure. I don't think I ever told you that whole story. And wrote it out, and her daughter gave me some of her supplies because she had already been deceased. And the daughters had copied those eggs already. And it's also one of my favorite designs of all time.
I did not know. I knew it was the Kraków egg, but I did not know the Niagara Falls connection. That's even more wonderful, and it's just beautiful. Absolutely a favorite of mine. And then this one is, I believe we call this the positive negative egg, I think. I really enjoy the kind of shadow effect that you get, again, with repeating pattern, rounded leaves and flowers, and so many different color combinations could be used.
And you use them very well.
I like this one. It's very striking. It's very simple, but striking. This is a good one. I like when people are starting with Pisanki. This is a good one to start with because it is a very repetitive design, not incredibly technically tricky, and only 2 colors. But it turns out absolutely beautifully and very striking. And then with this one, I do like this one. What's the history of this design? Do you know?
That comes from Eastern Poland. It's from part of my research of a gal who would spend her whole Lent writing Pisanki in the hundreds, and then she would exchange them for things like you give me a ham and I'll give you 6 eggs, and you give me some sausage and you give me the bread. So she filled up her Easter basket for the blessing and by making Pisanki. And so she made this star pattern, which is her own particular pattern.
I love it. I'm a big fan of this one. It's such a neat pattern. And again, it looks amazingly complicated, but it's actually one pattern, one layer, one level at a time, and you can build
Repeat it after each other.
Absolutely. And then, there's some room for personal expression in the band around the middle. I've seen a couple different ones in your pictures, Father, where the middle is different depending on whose egg it is, and I've made this one a few times. This one is, as previously stated, I have no Polish heritage other than by association, a beautiful association. My family is from Louisiana, and we're French, both sides of the family. And so as I started to really come into my own with the egg writing, I wanted to kind of invent my family egg, if you will. And so I took the fleur-de-lis, which is used as, for many things. It symbolizes the Holy Trinity, it symbolizes Mary, it symbolizes the Church and France, of course. So it is a very versatile design, but it is somewhat easy to replicate, and kind of made that the central portion of the egg.
Wonderful example of appropriating the tradition and how each artist puts their own signature on this ancient centuries-old art. Now we're going to go into...
So, now our egg, as you can see, has turned orange. That is always fun for me, is to watch how completely the colors will cover each other. And once again, we're going to just pat it dry very gently. This is a beautiful orange color. It's a little lighter than the pink, but I think it's going to be a nice contrast, and it's very spring-like.
Now just remind everyone, what was the color underneath there?
Pink.
That was pink.
Yes, a bright pink, and now we've got sort of a more pastel-y orange, which is good because they're going to be next to each other on the sunbursts, and I think that'll be a good, almost a rainbowy kind of effect, I think. We'll see. Every egg is different. So...
Every egg color is different, that's true, and it depends just to what the shell is like, how it's been treated, whatever, what type of shell. So don't expect something to be completely always consistent, the same color, the same effect.
You just have to accept each egg for the beauty that it is, and I think that's important. I like to share that with everyone when I do the workshops, and I have to remind myself, too, that, each one is a unique, beautiful work of art, and it may not have turned out exactly like you planned, but it will still be absolutely beautiful. And that's really, it's about the process and, the joy of making and experiencing, sometimes even more than the finished product.
When you speak about the beauty, there's a kind of an understanding in traditional culture and Polish culture, the more beauty, things of beauty even, like these eggs, the less ugliness there is. It's almost like light makes the darkness vanish. Beauty makes the ugliness of our life vanish. And to see children either receiving or even participating in the writing or watching an egg writer, their eyes and their whole face and their whole selves light up with interest and awe. And how can you do something from a candle and wax and pull it out of the dyes and see the colors? And the last step, which you're going to show us, is remove the sooted wax from the egg. It's a very mystical process and a very relaxing one, at least for me. The candle, and most Pisanki artists, in Europe at least, I don't know about here in the States, do this when the family's all asleep. Of course, they're not bothered then.
That is when I usually do it.
either early in the morning or later at night. When it's nice and quiet, it actually calms the soul.
It is very calming, although, again, sometimes I find it hard to stop. I have to remind myself that it's late and I need to sleep, even though I would make more and more and more eggs. Because sometimes that's the only time that you have available is when everyone else is asleep, and then you just, want to go on forever. So now we've colored all the myrtles. I'm just going to add a single line of orange in between each one of those pink V's I made before in the sunburst pattern. So once again, just drawing lines, and anytime you're drawing lines, it does help to sort of rest the extra fingers.
I hope everybody that's viewing this is seeing how easy Samantha makes this look. She's really become a natural at it, and you can see it in the virtuosity of her work, which we just saw in the basket, but especially when we're going to take the wax off.
Well, thank you. I do have to remind myself sometimes to slow down. You don't want to get ahead of yourself. That's when you make mistakes.
It probably should be mentioned too that the dyes that we are using are specially produced for Pisanki, or egg writers. They're chemical aniline dyes. They're available at various places if you do a search online, and various order houses can send them to you. They're non-edible dyes. In other words, these particular Pisanki are not meant to be eaten after. They're meant to be kept in the home, especially after they're blessed on Holy Saturday as signs of the resurrection, to keep one in your china cabinet or somewhere visible, the sign of the presence of Jesus' blessing all year round. So it's really something that remains with us the rest of the year. I remember growing up going to people's homes, and at least I had this awe for this whole art even before, when I was so small I wasn't even writing. And I'd be transfixed in seeing in my grandmother's house a pisanka way up on the 12-foot ceiling cabinet with a glass door on it. And she would take it down once a year at Easter time to let me look at it and touch it for a little bit and put it right back up so nobody breaks it or anything. And a number of people's homes had at least one or a few in a basket.
So we've now completed the writing portion of this egg. All of our lines are complete. And you can see
what are the colors we have there?
So we have orange and pink from our first step, and then white. All of the lines we originally drew will be white. So that's going to add a little more dimension to it. And our final color will be dark green. So we will once again put it into the dye bath.
And that's the dark green color?
It is dark green. Okay. So now our final color of dye has taken, which is the dark green. Once again, cradle the egg in the towel.
If you're using spoons like this to remove the egg, it's important to remove the egg from the top, because usually the spoon has a pool of dye in it. You tend to, after a while, get dye onto your hands and everything like that. And as you see here, Samantha's using the paper towel folded in 4. All these little things are just after years of practice, little things that you learn to help save your hands from becoming colored, because if you're working on more eggs, you pick up a white egg and it's got green, you got green dye on your hands, it could affect and bleed out onto the egg. So just be aware of that. And
always for this last step, it's also important to make sure you dry it very well, especially when you have a lot of thin writing like this. If there is still dye on the egg, it will kind of crackle and almost cook when you put it into the flame, and it could scorch your egg. You don't want that, so you want to make sure it's nice and dry. So now we're ready for the final step of our egg writing, which is known as the resurrection phase. We'll get to that in a minute, wherein we melt off all of this wax that we just put on, and we get to see the beautiful colors. So you want to hold your egg right next to a candle, not on top of it, on the side, because if you put it on top, it gets too hot and it tends to scorch, and and just get it to where it's melty. Now you can see the colors are coming through. So as the wax will get shiny, just as it becomes shiny, wipe it with a tissue. Always with a tissue, not a paper towel, because tissues are softer. So we just kind of work your way around the egg, one little section at a time. And as this is an Easter tradition, it is important to, once your eggs are completed, to bring them with you on Holy Saturday for the basket blessing. Many churches, I know St. Casimir's is among them, have a basket blessing on Saturday of Holy Week, the day before Easter. And I don't always bring all of my eggs. I often will just bring one that is sort of a representation, but once the eggs are blessed, they truly represent the resurrection of Jesus. And this, once again, this level is called the resurrection phase. We're kind of bringing these colors back to life after they've been blackened by the soot and darkened by all of the dyes. So you can see here the egg is getting waxed. As it warms up, it becomes shiny, and once it's shiny, you just give it a little wipe, and the colors are starting to pop out. Sometimes this is the most painstaking part of egg writing, but it is important.
When you see Samantha holding the egg up close to the flame, you see almost that the flame takes on the contour of the egg. And that's exactly where you want it, nothing closer. Because you get it closer, you'll scorch it. If the flame touches the egg, it will scorch whatever color you have there, and you can't get a scorch off. But if you just keep it so it kind of keeps to the contour, and then an area of the egg turns into molten wax, the sign of that is it liquefies. It looks almost like a mirror. And therefore, you can take and wipe off a portion of that. Because what's happening at the same time is that the shell is getting warmer, which actually helps release any of the molten wax. And here you see most beautifully the contrast between the waxed egg, where it's all covered with soot and dirt, and the resurrection out of the earth, the dark earth, and the sunburst patterns and floral patterns that emerge out from underneath this very dark, earthy, almost nondescript egg. And this is the exciting phase of the entire process, because you've been working on this egg for anywhere from 20 minutes to 2 hours, depending how intricate the design is. And they all don't have to be 2 hours long. But when you get a chance to see and the sheen of the egg, as you see perfectly presented here, against the color of the light and the various contrast colors, you feel a certain sense of excitement, accomplishment, celebration, participation in everything that's happening, not only to this egg, but into all creation that's groaning to just come out of winter, to come out to the light, to receive the beauty of the scent of the flowers, and for the seedlings to return. Everything comes as a burst. And this is a very significant aspect of the Polish celebration of Easter, but in any traditional society where all of creation participates. All of creation, the grasses, the trees, the flowers, which are used in the palm processions and the lilies, everything, including the human being, because of this art, participates in the rebirth and regeneration. And as Samantha mentioned so well here, after being blessed, the resurrection of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. This is how resurrection is celebrated in the Polish home.
Okay, so our egg is nearly free of wax. One way to kind of be sure as you're melting, there's always a few little spots that get missed. So it's good to wipe the tissue on the egg. You can feel the rough spots where the wax has not come off yet.
Yeah, using either the tissue or your finger to feel where there might be extra wax, or like you say, very well rough spots, helps the overall appearance and smoothness of the surface. A most magnificent job, Samantha.
Oh, thank you.
I'm already excited about Easter, just looking at that work you have there. the myrtle, the sunburst together, the triangles, the Holy Trinity. It's just beautiful and a wonderful job.
Thank you. It is. It's beautiful. It's very simple, and yet this is the final product. Does not look, looks way more complicated than all those little steps would necessarily suggest. So I think that's, again, a lesson to anyone who wishes to try this. Try it. Break it down into sections, into pieces, and it will be much less intimidating. And the more you do, the easier it gets.
And you've shared it with so many of your friends who begged you to have workshops every year. Now you're sharing it with the widest audience we could all share this with through media and social media. So thank you for being a part of this Easter celebration.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure.
But this is how we celebrate Easter. This is our Easter. And we celebrate it very closely and intimately under our own roof. And from the table to the altar and right back.